I'd like to also take this moment to send our thoughts and prayers to our courageous friend, somebody that I've gotten to know very well, Steve Scalise, and everyone recovering from the assault. Never fails. Never fails.
When the dishonesty of the mainstream media isn't enough for you, you can always count on the rebel media to step up.
Liberty, freedom.
Not the normalization of political violence against the right. This is unacceptable. You cannot.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pause. We're going to pause. Security.
This is violence.
Security, please.
I know I'm a little late to this one, but I feel the need to comment, and from what I've seen so far, people seem to be focusing a lot on the tactics of this situation. SJW tactics, rules for radicals. But everyone seems to be overlooking the targets part. The expression, no bad tactics, only bad targets, isn't entirely wrong, but I would rephrase this with a caveat. The only bad tactic is an ineffective one. The real problem I see here is both a poor choice of target and a poor tactic. Attacking this play for inciting political violence doesn't make much sense, since the play has been acted out with other presidents in the past, well before Trump had even declared his presidential run. And let's be real here, this play is a reimagining of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. The whole point is that assassinating your leader probably isn't a good idea because your civilization will fall into chaos. With these things in mind, it seems to me that this play just isn't that important. Nothing of significance could have been accomplished here, no matter your angle of attack. There's one really important detail to all of this that nearly everyone seems to have overlooked. The actions of Jack Posobiec and discount Lauren Southern at Shakespeare in the Park appear to have been nothing more than a cash grab. Examining a simple Whois lookup of the free Laura domain name shows us that the domain was created hours before she was arrested. Either Ezra Levant is clairvoyant, or more likely than that, Laura getting arrested was the plan all along. To incur a minor few $100 infraction and then start a fundraising campaign for tens of thousands of dollars to pay legal fees. So aside from being a poor choice of target, the act of protest itself doesn't even appear to have been sincere. By Posobiec's own admission, he basically is just getting a high off of doing this kind of thing.
You are all Goebbels! You are all Nazis like Joseph Goebbels!
If the rebel really wanted to make a difference, they would target college administrators and professors, media personalities and outlets, politicians and government agencies for protest and demonstration. The source of political correctness and social justice activism and policy is the university system and certain sectors of the government, and this is where right-wing activists should concentrate their proverbial fire. There are still others who feel inclined to comment on the Cold Civil War in a manner of simply decrying everyone involved. If you see a problem with SJWs, but then turn around and default to a position of accusing anyone who takes or advocates taking action of acting like an SJW, you're essentially opening your mouth for the sake of hearing yourself talk. You recognize a problem, but decry any potential solution beyond making YouTube videos and smugly tweeting about it. Sooner or later, one has to recognize where one's interests lie. All of that being said, people on all sides of this issue seem to primarily think of it in terms of a free speech issue, but no one's free speech is under any credible threat in this situation. Concern about free speech would probably be better directed, again, in the direction of colleges and universities, where the assault on people speaking their mind has been underway for years. To be totally crystal here, what I'm saying is that disruption and protest are not invalid tactics. Making things difficult for people with power is not an invalid tactic. The problem here is that a bunch of actors putting on a small, little-known stage production are not those people. There is an enormous power differential between these actors and the professors in our universities who are actually pushing social justice activism and radical leftist politics. And protesting isn't the only option. We can get creative with how we fight these people. After the incident at Missouri University involving Melissa I Need Some Muscle Over Here clique, Mizzou saw a huge fall-off in applicants, which translated into the school losing tens of millions of dollars. Sometimes the best way to vote is to vote with your wallet. We could create a disincentive against these schools requiring students to take social justice-related courses. That's just one example, but it's an example of hitting them where it hurts, just like they try to do to us. People who speak against the progressive narrative risk losing their jobs, risk getting kicked out of school, and risk losing social capital because of the engagement in these kinds of tactics. And if the opportunity presents itself, I don't see why we shouldn't do it right back. We need our own long march through the institutions of sorts. A YouTuber called The Distributist recently made a video called Striking from Within the Walls, in which he proposes a potential method for right-wing students to resist the institution without directly outing themselves and putting their academic career at risk. I've linked that in the description. But whatever we do, it's clear that we can't just keep doing the same old thing that we've been doing, because it's not working, which is why when someone like, say, Roaming Millennial says things like this,
As someone who is part of the pro-free speech community, a community that often argues that violence and words are two completely different things, I think we need to be really careful that we're not making the same arguments against our opponents that they're making against us. The regressive left so often accuses the right of causing violence with their words, or using violent words, right? We see this in how some people are actually arguing now that misgendering a trans person is a form of violence, or can lead to violence. But I think most of us here at least would agree that that's ridiculous, and as much as I disagree with Democrats who say that Trump is destroying our democracy, I don't think we should be worried that them saying that could potentially lead to shootings. If we're going to poke fun at people who allege that our non-violent rhetoric can lead to violence, we can't just turn around and then start accusing them of the exact same thing. It doesn't make sense.
To put it politely, I'm left wanting for something. The ongoing media narrative that we've seen surrounding the Trump administration and his supporters is nothing like hurting the feelings of a transgendered person. It's a totally disproportionate comparison. Calling somebody by the wrong gender pronoun certainly can't be said to inspire violence on the same level that a relentless stream of lies about the president being a traitor and illegitimate and Putin stealing the election and all this hysterical stuff. It has just been lie after lie after lie.
How wonderfully revealing this exchange is. The Russia story is a nothing burger? Yep, we knew that. If only they admitted as much on CNN. But in private, they know it too. You remember the tape released just yesterday in which a CNN producer conceded that his boss, Jeff Zucker, demanded that CNN shows drop actual news coverage in order to spend much more time on the Russia conspiracy, since that storyline makes more money for the network? It is as corrupt as you imagined it was. Meanwhile, according to the New York Post, CNN apparently had to retract last week's bogus Russia story and fire the 3 reporters who wrote it after being threatened with a $100 million libel suit from Anthony Scaramucci. He's the Trump associate who was slandered by the piece.
And when you put things into that context and put them on that scale, it's not surprising to find that the congressional baseball shooter James T. Hodgkinson was writing the kind of things that he was writing on his Facebook page. I mean, at one point in Roaming Millennial's video, she says that we're unsure of the shooter's motivations.
Tonight, the FBI focused on these posts portraying a deep hatred for Republicans, even calling President Trump a traitor. Trump has destroyed our democracy. It's time to destroy Trump and company. And he posted a cartoon critical of Congressman Steve Scalise, who he allegedly shot today. He joined anti-Republican Facebook groups, including one dubbed Terminate the Republican Party. His now removed Facebook page showing his ardent support of Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator confirming today Hodgkinson volunteered for the campaign.
The guy had a list of elected Republican officials that the police found on his body. Unless Hodgkinson is part of some deep cover, vast right-wing conspiracy to incriminate leftists, then how much clearer can you get than this? Now, I should be clear that I'm not blaming Bernie Sanders here. He did come out and unequivocally denounce the attack and condemn Hodgkinson's actions. And of course, I support free speech in principle and as an ideal, but that's really not the situation that we're dealing with here. People throughout the education system, the corporate sector, the social media companies, the legacy media, and even in the alternative media, as we've seen recently. Powerful people in these sectors have an interest in silencing dissenting thought, and they're doing it all the time. Just because it's not the court system doing it doesn't mean that it's not censorship, especially when you consider the differential in influence between, say, a small group of individuals staging a protest and a huge media company like Facebook pushing or silencing a certain message. And if we want to be principled and just keep letting them do it to us because we have to be the bigger men, well, look what that's gotten the conservative movement in the last 50 or 60 years. There's a reason I don't consider myself a conservative. They utterly failed to conserve anything because they're too principled to fight back. We can't just keep using the same ineffective tactics over and over and expect anything to change. So in light of what I've already mentioned about the media's dishonesty, how did they react to this shooting? Aside from the usual rhetoric on guns, the New York Times seized the opportunity to revive a long-discredited myth about the shooting of Democratic Representative Gabrielle Giffords, in which they blamed Sarah Palin for radicalizing the shooter. As much as the media tries to downplay these incidents or distort them entirely, they simply represent a ratcheting up of the pattern of violence that we've seen throughout Donald Trump's campaign and presidency. And yet the media consistently pushes the narrative that so-called far-right extremism is the greater threat. Vice Media recently published an article entitled "Extremism Experts Are Starting to Worry About the Left." Starting to? The article features choice quotes from Oren Segal of the Anti-Defamation League's Center on Extremism, in which he seemingly begrudgingly states,
I think we're in a time when we can't ignore the extremism from the left. When we have anti-fascist counter-protests, not that they're the same as white supremacists, that can ratchet up the violence at these events, and it means we can see people who are violent on their own be attracted to that.
The ADL as an organization loves to say that rhetoric can inspire violence, but I suppose not when the largest news outlets are lying to the public about the president being a traitor, and lying about the motivations and behavior of his supporters. A perfect example of this gaslighting is the alleged rise in hate crimes against ethnic minorities since Trump was elected. The majority of these incidents have turned out to be false, and they often go unretracted, the biggest example of which being the massive increase in anti-Semitic bomb threats against Jewish community centers and schools. This was, of course, claimed to have been done by racist neo-Nazi Trump supporters, but most of the threats turned out to have been called in by an American-Israeli dual citizen, with a small number turning out to have been called in by a black left-wing journalist. In the wake of the attack, blue checkmarks and Twitter leftists took to celebrating the shooting, making all manner of justifications for why Scalise and his staffers might have deserved it. We even saw this in the media, with MSNBC's Joy Reid entertaining the same notions.
About this, and I wanted to sort of give everyone else the benefit of your wisdom on this. This idea that Republicans now have, that they're saying we all have to come together, we have to rally together. When you heard them saying that, what did you hear?
Representative Ryan said, when you attack one of us, you attack all of us. Well, this can't just be a moral ethic that you apply to members of Congress. That's why the real question is, will 1 or 2 days of changes in personality mean a fundamental change in public policy? That's the moral question. I've been thinking about this, Joy. You know, all of those that were injured needed health care. So now, will they go back to work and say every American deserves health care, deserves what we receive? A black man from my alma mater saved their lives. Will they go back to work and restore the Voting Rights Act and stop systemic racism against black people?
Steve Scalise has a history that we've all been forced to sort of ignore on race. He did come to leadership after some controversy over attending a white nationalist event, which he says he didn't know what it was. He also co-sponsored a bill to amend the Constitution to define marriages between a man and a woman. He voted for the House health care bill, which, as you said, would gut health care for millions of people, including 3 million children. And he co-sponsored a bill to repeal the ban on semi-automatic weapons. Because he is in jeopardy and everyone is pulling for him, are we required in a moral sense to put that aside at the moment?
What we're required to say is we hope he recovers, and then when he recovers, there's a renewed mindset.
And a Nebraskan Democratic Party official was caught on tape saying that he was glad Scalise was shot.
Right now. So what is it that you want to do?
Let me tell you, that motherfucker is the one that was shot, the Scafie guy. I mean, that guy, what's his name, Scalise?
I really don't want you to deflect right now.
No, this motherfucker, like, his whole job is, like, to get people, convince Republicans to fucking kick people off fucking health care.
Okay.
We know all of this.
I
hate this motherfucker.
Yeah. All of
this. I'm fucking glad he got shot.
We've laid in
I'm
our...
glad he got shot.
So dude,
I'm not going to fucking say that in public.
You don't have well, then what are you saying it to us for?
Say something. Say something.
What are you telling us for?
I wish he was fucking dead.
Why are you telling us, but not telling anyone else?
I'm trying to fucking figure out this
It's
shit
okay,
out.
because I've been recording this conversation since you've come in, so I will publicly release it myself.
It's worth mentioning that he was fired for these comments, but that's only because he got caught. And I find it kind of hard to imagine that he's the only official member of the Democratic Party who feels this way. Imagine what activist professors and Antifa and left-wing journalists think about this. It has become abundantly clear that this is a country that is divided against itself. It's like multiple parallel realities are bleeding into each other. Some guy flying a Make America Great Again flag on his pickup truck was shot at on I-465 in Indiana the day after the congressional baseball shooting. That same day, some marchers in Philadelphia could be heard chanting, Now, anyone who knows me knows that I'm not the biggest fan of the Republican Party, and a lot of my opinions on Trump have changed in the last 6 months. But those are subjects for other videos, and at the end of the day, if you support Trump in the slightest, or if you lean right in the slightest, or oppose the left in the slightest, you are a Nazi as far as they're concerned. Obviously, I can't say that I know exactly where things are headed, but it definitely doesn't look good. It goes without saying that this is not the last time something like this is going to happen, and if the pattern continues, then it's going to get worse. We need to stop worrying about being above certain tactics and instead start picking better targets. If you're involved in real-world activism, even if it's something as simple as putting up flyers or stickers or something, be safe out there. That's all for now.